In the official Mother's Day photo, my daughter-in-law whispered, "Smile, you're going to a nursing home." I smiled like I was 20. On Monday, I revealed I had donated my duplex to my caregiver. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I'm 68 years old, and I never thought a Mother's Day photo would become the moment that changed everything. But there I was, standing in my own living room, surrounded by the fake smiles and forced cheer that had become our family gatherings, when my daughter-in-law Tatum leaned in close and whispered those words that would haunt me for days. "Smile, you're going to the nursing home." The camera flashed before I could process what she'd said. My smile was already in place, the same practiced expression I'd worn for years of family photos. But inside, something cracked. The words hit me like ice water, cold and shocking, spreading through my chest until I could barely breathe. Tatum stepped back, her own smile never wavering, her arm still wrapped around my shoulders like a loving daughter-in-law. To everyone else in the room, we looked like the perfect family. My son Marcus was adjusting his tie, his wife looked radiant in her coral dress, and I stood between them looking like the proud matriarch I was supposed to be. But I knew what I'd heard. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I moved through the motions, serving the meal I'd spent 2 days preparing, listening to conversations that seemed to happen around me rather than with me. Every time I looked at Tatum, she was watching me with those calculating green eyes, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. Marcus barely spoke to me, which had become normal over the past 3 years since he married Tatum. My son, who used to call me every day, now seemed to see me as an obligation. When he did address me, it was usually to suggest I should take it easy or not worry about whatever I was doing. As I cleared the dishes, my hands shaking slightly, I caught fragments of their conversation from the living room. "She's getting more forgetful," Tatum was saying, her voice carrying that concerned tone she'd perfected. "Yesterday she asked me 3 times what day it was." That wasn't true. I remembered every conversation, every slight, every dismissive comment. My mind was as sharp as it had ever been, but somehow Tatum had convinced everyone otherwise. "Maybe we should start looking into options," Marcus replied, his voice heavy with what sounded like resignation rather than genuine concern. "I mean, she shouldn't be living alone in this big house." I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles white. This big house was my home, the place where I'd raised Marcus, where my husband Paul and I had built our life together. Every corner held memories. Every room told a story of the family I'd poured my heart into creating. But listening to them talk, I might as well have been a piece of furniture they were discussing whether to keep or donate. The conversation continued, and I learned more than I ever wanted to know. They'd apparently been discussing this for months. Tatum had already researched facilities. They were worried about the burden I was becoming, about how my declining health was affecting their lives. My declining health. I played tennis twice a week, volunteered at the library, and could still remember every birthday, anniversary, and important date in our family's history. But somehow, in Tatum's version of reality, I was already 1 foot in the grave. After they left, I sat in my empty house, staring at the Mother's Day card Marcus had given me. "To the best mom in the world," it read in cheerful pink script. "Thank you for everything you've given us." The irony wasn't lost on me. I walked through my home that night, really looking at it for the first time in months. The duplex I'd worked so hard to maintain, with its gleaming hardwood floors and carefully tended garden. The family photos lining the hallway, showing happier times when Marcus still looked at me with love instead of obligation. The guest room where I'd hoped future grandchildren might stay, now gathering dust because Tatum had made it clear children weren't in their plans. I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible in my own life. But Tatum had made one crucial mistake in her whispered threat. She'd underestimated me. She saw a frail old woman who could be easily manipulated and discarded. She didn't see the woman who had raised a son alone after Paul's heart attack, who had built a life from nothing, who had survived losses that would have broken weaker people. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. If they wanted to play games with my life, I would show them exactly what this old woman was capable of. But first, I needed to understand just how far their betrayal went. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For too long, I'd been making excuses for Marcus's behavior, telling myself that marriage changes people, that Tatum just needed time to warm up to me. But after yesterday's whispered threat, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I needed to know exactly what they were planning. Marcus had given me a key to their house years ago, back when he still cared about maintaining our relationship. "In case of emergencies, Mom," he'd said. Well, this felt like an emergency to me. I waited until I saw them leave for work, then drove the 10 minutes to their pristine suburban home. My hands were trembling as I unlocked the front door, not from fear of being caught, but from the knowledge that what I might find would probably break my heart completely. Their house was exactly what I'd expected from Tatum. Everything white and minimalist, like a magazine spread with no soul. There were no family photos, no personal touches that might indicate an actual family lived there. Even the few pictures of Marcus were formal, posed shots that looked more like business portraits than family memories. I started in Marcus's home office, looking through papers on his desk. What I found there made my stomach drop. Brochures for assisted living facilities, some with handwritten notes in Tatum's careful script. "Too expensive," she'd written on one. "No private rooms available," on another. On the third one, "Sunset." Manor, she'd circled the monthly rate and written, "Perfect basic care only. Basic care only." Like I was already dead and just needed a place to wait it out. But the worst part was finding the legal documents underneath. Papers from a lawyer about transferring property, guardianship rights, and something called estate planning for elderly family members. They'd already consulted an attorney about taking control of my assets. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. Each document was another nail in the coffin of any remaining love I had for the son I'd raised. Found more evidence in their bedroom, a notebook in Tatum's nightstand where she'd been calculating numbers. My monthly expenses, the estimated value of my duplex, even projections for how long I might live, based on average life expectancy for women with her health conditions. Health conditions. I didn't have any health conditions beyond the normal, aches and pains of being 68. But the cruelest discovery was in that same notebook. Tatum had written out a timeline. Phase 1, establish mental decline concerns. Phase 2, discuss safety issues with Marcus. Phase 3, present nursing home as only option. Phase 4, sell property and liquidate assets. She'd been planning this for over a year. I sat on their expensive white couch, staring at the evidence of their betrayal, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not sadness, not hurt. Those emotions were too small for what I was feeling. This was rage, pure and focused, burning through me like fire. They thought I was a foolish old woman who would just go quietly into whatever box they wanted to put me in. They thought I'd be grateful for their help in managing my declining years. They had no idea who they were dealing with. As I drove home, my mind was already working. I thought about Rosa, my part-time caregiver who came by 3 times a week to help with cleaning and errands. Rosa, who actually listened when I spoke, who brought me homemade lumpia and told me stories about her family in the Philippines. Rosa, who treated me like a human being instead of a burden. That afternoon, when Rosa arrived for her usual Tuesday visit, I was ready. "Rosa," I said, watching her face carefully. can I ask you something personal? She paused in her dusting, her kind brown eyes meeting mine with concern. Of course, Mrs. Janine. What is it? Are you happy working for me? I mean, really happy, or are you just being polite? The question seemed to surprise her. She sat down, her dust cloth, and sat in the chair across from me. Mrs. Janine, you are one of the kindest people I work for. You treat me like family, not like help. Why do you ask? I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception, but all I saw was genuine warmth. What would you say if I told you I might not be living here much longer? Her face fell. Are you moving? Are you sick? My son thinks I should be in a nursing home, I said quietly. Rosa's expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. That boy doesn't know what he has, she said fiercely. You are strong. You are smart. You take better care of yourself than people half your age. Why would he want to put you away? Because his wife thinks I'm a burden. Rosa made a disgusted sound. That woman. She has ice in her veins. I see how she looks at you, like you're dirt under her shoes. It was validating to hear someone else say what I'd been feeling for years. Rosa, can I trust you with something important? Of course. I'm going to need your help with something that might change both our lives. Her eyes widened, but she nodded without hesitation. Whatever you need, Mrs. Janine. That night, I began planning my revenge. But it wouldn't be hasty or emotional. It would be calculated, thorough, and devastating. Marcus and Tatum thought they could manipulate a helpless old woman, but they were about to learn that I was far from helpless. And by the time I was done, they would understand exactly what they had lost. Over the next few days, I learned more about Rosa than I had in the 2 years she'd been helping me. We talked while she worked, and while I pretended to read or watch television. What I discovered broke my heart in the best possible way. Rosa had been a registered nurse in the Philippines, working in a busy hospital in Manila. She'd left everything behind to come to America, not for herself, but for her 3 children. Her husband had died in a motorcycle accident when the youngest was only 5, leaving her with no choice but to find a way to provide for them alone. I clean houses now, she told me as she folded my laundry with the same care she'd once used to tend to patients. It's honest work, but it's not what I trained for. Every month, I send most of my money home so my children can stay in school. My oldest, Maria, she wants to be a doctor. My son, Carlos, he's good with computers. And little Anna, she's only 12, but she's so smart. Do you miss them? I asked, though the answer was obvious from the way her voice softened when she spoke. About them. Every day. I haven't seen them in 3 years. The plan was to bring them here once I got established. But everything cost so much more than I expected. She paused in her folding, her hand stilling on one of my sweaters. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, leaving them with my sister. You did what any mother would do, I told her. You sacrificed for your children's future. That evening, after Rosa left, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a legal pad, sketching out the bones of my plan. It was audacious, maybe even crazy, but it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in years. The next morning, I called my attorney, Harold Brennan. Harold and I went way back. He'd handled Paul's estate when he died, helped me with various legal matters over the years. More importantly, he was one of the few people who still treated me like I had a brain in my head. Janine, he said warmly when I walked into his office. What can I do for you today? I want to make some changes to my will, I said, settling into the familiar leather chair across from his desk. And I want to discuss transferring ownership of my property. Harold raised an eyebrows. That's a significant step. May I ask what's prompted this? I told him everything. The whispered threat, the documents I'd found, the calculated plan to have me declared incompetent and shipped off to the cheapest facility they could find. Harold's expression grew darker with each detail. Janine, I'm so sorry, he said when I finished. I've known Marcus since he was a boy. I never would have expected this. Neither did I admitted. But now I need to protect myself and do something good with what I have left. What did you have in mind? I want to deed my duplex to Rosa de la Cruz. Not in my will, but now, while I'm alive and can see it happen. Harold leaned back in his chair, considering. That's a substantial gift. Are you certain about this? More certain than I've been about anything in years. I pulled out a folder of papers I'd prepared. I've done my research. Rosa is a legal resident. She's been working steadily for 3 years, and she has excellent references from all her employers. She deserves a chance at the American dream, and I want to be the one to give it to her. And your son. I met his eyes steadily. My son has made his feelings about me very clear. He sees me as a burden and my property as his inheritance. I prefer to give my home to someone who will appreciate it and use it to build a better life. Harold was quiet for a long moment. This will devastate Marcus when he finds out. Good, I said, and I meant it. Maybe it will teach him something about taking people for granted. We spent the next hour going over the legal details. Harold explained that I could transfer the property immediately through a quit-claim deed, but that we should also set up some protections to ensure Marcus couldn't challenge my competency after the fact. We'll need to document your mental state thoroughly, Harold said. Medical evaluation, psychological assessment if necessary. We want to make it clear that this decision was made by someone of sound mind. Whatever it takes. As I left Harold's office, I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since Paul died, I was taking control of my own life, instead of letting other people make decisions for me. That afternoon, when Rosa arrived for her regular cleaning day, I was ready. Rosa, I said, patting the couch beside. I have something important to discuss with you. She sat down, her expression concerned. Is everything all right, Mrs. Janine? I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If you could bring your children to America, would you? Her face lit up like sunrise. Of course, but that's impossible. I could never afford to sponsor them, and even if I could, where would we live? I rent a tiny room from another Filipino. Family? There's no space for children. What if I told you there might be a way? She looked at me skeptically. Mrs. Janine, I appreciate your kindness, but miracles don't happen to people like me. I took her hands in mine, feeling how rough they were from years of hard work. Rosa, I want to give you my duplex. She went completely still. I don't understand. I want to deed my house to you. Both sides of the duplex. You could live in one side and rent out the other for income, or bring your children here and have room for everyone. You could start the life you came to America to build. Rosa stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Mrs. Janine, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. But your son, your family. My son has made it clear that he doesn't want me around, I said gently. He's planning to put me in a nursing home and sell this house anyway. I'd rather give it to someone who will love it and use it well. Rosa was crying in earnest now. I can't accept this. It's too much. Rosa, you've given me something precious these past 2 years. You've treated me with dignity and kindness when my own family sees me as a burden. You've listened to my stories, shared your own, made me feel like I still matter. This house needs a family who will fill it with love and laughter again. She was shaking her head, overwhelmed. Your son will be so angry. I smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. Let me worry about Marcus. The next few weeks were a delicate dance of deception. While I worked with Harold to finalize the property transfer, I had to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. Marcus and Tatum continued their campaign to convince me I needed help, and I let them think they were succeeding. "Mom, you left the stove on again yesterday," Marcus said during one of his increasingly frequent check-in visits. It was a lie. I'd been out playing tennis when he claimed to have stopped by, but I nodded apologetically. "Oh dear, did. I've been so scattered lately." Tatum, who had accompanied him, exchanged a meaningful glance with her husband. "These things happen, Janine. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's just part of getting older." I bit my tongue to keep from telling her exactly what I thought about her condescending tone. "We've been thinking," Marcus continued, settling onto my couch like he already owned it. "Maybe it would be good for you to have someone around more. Often, for safety." "What do you mean?" I asked, playing confused. "Well, that cleaning lady you have, Rosa, she only comes 3 times a week. What if something happened on the days she's not here?" Tatum leaned forward, her expression full of fake concern. "We've been looking into some options for you. There are some lovely facilities where you'd have people around all the time, activities to keep you busy, medical care if you need it." "Facilities?" I let my voice quaver slightly. "You mean like a nursing home?" "Not a nursing home," Marcus said quickly. "More like assisted living. Very nice places with your own apartment and everything." I knew he was lying. I'd seen the brochures, and Sunset Manor was definitely a nursing home, the kind where people went to die slowly and quietly. "I don't know," I said hesitantly. "This is my home. Paul and I built our life here." "Dad's been gone for 7 years, Mom," Marcus said, his voice taking on that patient tone people use with children. "Don't you think it's time to start a new chapter?" A new chapter. As if my life was a book he was ready to close. "Maybe you could just visit one of these places," Tatum suggested. "Just to see what they're like. No pressure." I pretended to consider this. I suppose that couldn't hurt. The relief on their faces was almost comical. They thought they'd won, that they'd successfully manipulated me into going along with their plan. They had no idea that while they were setting their trap, I was setting one of my own. That same afternoon, after they left, Rosa arrived for her regular cleaning day. The property transfer documents were sitting on my kitchen table, signed and notarized, ready to be filed with the county recorder's office. "Mrs. Janine," Rosa said, staring at the papers like they might disappear if she looked away. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" "Rosa, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." I picked up the deed and handed it to her. "This is yours now. Your children can come to America. You can build the life you dreamed of." She took the papers with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have, just by being kind to me when no one else was." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about practical matters. Rosa would need to give notice at her other cleaning jobs, start the process of sponsoring her children's immigration, and prepare for them to join her. The rental income from one side of the duplex would be enough to support them while she transitioned back to nursing, which had always been her dream. "I want to take care of you," Rosa said as we sat in what would now be her living room. "You don't have to go to any facility. I'm a nurse. I can make sure you're safe and healthy right here." The irony was perfect. While Marcus and Tatum were planning to warehouse me in the cheapest facility they could find, Rosa was offering to care for me in the home that was now hers. "We'll see what happens," I told her. "First, let's get through the next few days." The following Friday, Marcus called to arrange the visit to Sunset Manor. "They have an opening for a tour tomorrow morning," he said. "Tatum and I can pick you up at 10. "That sounds fine," I replied, injecting just the right amount of resignation into my voice. That evening, I called Harold. "The deed is filed," he confirmed. "Rosa de la Cruz is now the legal owner of your property. There's no way to reverse it without her consent." "And she won't give it," I said with satisfaction. "Janine, are you prepared for how Marcus is going to react when he finds out?" I thought about all the years I'd spent walking on eggshells around his moods, making excuses for his behavior, accepting his increasingly cold treatment because I was afraid of losing him completely. "Harold, I lost my son years ago. I just didn't want to admit it." Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, which seemed appropriate for a visit to what was essentially a death warehouse. Marcus and Tatum picked me up right on time, both of them unusually cheerful. "You're going to love this place, Mom," Marcus said as we drove through the city. "They have bingo, movie nights, all sorts of activities." Sunset Manor looked exactly as depressing as I'd expected. A squat, institutional building surrounded by a parking lot, with a few sad shrubs attempting to provide landscaping. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and despair. Our tour guide was a perky young woman named Brittany, who spoke in the overly bright tone people use when talking to small children or the mentally impaired. She showed us the common areas, a dining room full of residents staring blankly at their meals, a recreation room where a few people dozed in wheelchairs while a television blared, and finally, a typical resident room. It was tiny, barely large enough for a bed, a dresser, and a small chair. One small window looked out on the parking lot. This was where they wanted to put me to die. "The monthly fee covers everything," Brittany chirped. "Meals, basic medical care, activities, laundry service. It's really quite a bargain." A bargain. That's what my life had been reduced to in their minds. "What do you think, Mom?" Marcus asked, his arm around my shoulders in a gesture that might have looked affectionate to an observer, but felt like a cage to me. I looked around the sterile, little room and smiled. "It's very nice," I said. "When could I move in?" The relief on their faces was almost insulting. They'd been so sure I'd put up a fight, make it difficult for them. They had no idea that their real difficulties were just beginning. Monday morning, I would reveal exactly what this bargain was going to cost them. Monday morning came with brilliant sunshine, which felt like a good omen. I woke up early, made myself a proper breakfast, and dressed in my best navy suit, the one I'd worn to Paul's funeral and other significant occasions. Today felt equally momentous. At exactly 9 o'clock, I called Marcus. "Mom?" He sounded surprised to hear from me so early. "Is everything okay?" "I need you and Tatum to come over this morning," I said, keeping my voice calm and measured. "There's something important we need to discuss about my living situation." I could practically hear him perking up through the phone. "Of course, Mom. We'll be right there." They arrived within 30 minutes, both of them looking eager and slightly smug. Tatum was carrying a manila folder, probably more papers about Sunset Manor or legal documents they wanted me to sign. "Come sit down," I said, gesturing to the living room. I took my usual chair, the one Paul used to tease me about because I'd claimed it as mine from the day we'd moved in. Marcus and Tatum settled on the couch, both leaning forward expectantly. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation on Friday," I began, "and about what you said regarding my future." "We're so glad you're being reasonable about this, Mom," Marcus said, his voice warm in a way it hadn't been in years. Amazing how kind he could sound when he thought he was getting what he wanted. "Yes," Tatum added, opening her folder. "We've brought some preliminary paperwork. Nothing major, just some forms to get the process started." I nodded thoughtfully. "Before we discuss any paperwork, I should tell you about the decision I've made." "Of course," Marcus said. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, savoring this moment. "I've decided to deed my duplex to Rosa." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Marcus and Tatum stared at me like I'd spoken in ancient Greek. "I'm sorry," Tatum said finally, her voice tight. "Could you repeat that?" "I've given my house to Rosa de la Cruz. Both sides of the duplex. The papers were filed with the county last Friday." Marcus went pale. "Mom, that's not funny." "I'm not joking." I reached into my purse and pulled out a copy of the filed deed, placing it on the coffee table between us. "Rosa is now the legal owner of this property." Tatum snatched up the papers, her eyes scanning the legal text frantically. This can't be legitimate. She's not even a citizen. She's a permanent resident, which is perfectly legal for property. Ownership, I corrected. Harold Brennan handled all the paperwork. Everything is completely above board. Marcus was staring at the deed like it might burst into flames. Mom, you can't do this. This house is supposed to be. We had plans. Yes, I know about your plans, I said quietly. I know about Sunset Manor, about the calculations in Tatum's notebook, about the lawyer you consulted regarding my assets. The color drained from Tatum's face. How did you? You left me a key to your house, remember, Marcus? I used it. I let that sink in for a moment. I saw everything. The brochures with your notes about basic care only. The timeline for establishing my mental decline. The projections for how long I might live. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Mom, you don't understand. We were just trying to plan ahead, to make sure you were taken care of. I laughed, and it felt good to let some of my anger show. Taken care of? Marcus, you were planning to put me in the cheapest facility you could find and pocket the money from selling my home. That's not taking care of me. That's disposing of me. That's not true, Tatum said, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? Then explain the note you wrote about basic care only on the Sunset Manor brochure. Explain the calculations about my life expectancy. Explain the legal documents about taking control of my assets. Neither of them could meet my eyes. You know what the worst part is? I continued, my voice growing stronger. I would have helped you if you'd just asked. If you'd come to me honestly and said you were struggling financially, I would have found a way to help. But instead, you decided to have me declared incompetent and steal everything I've worked for. We never said incompetent, Marcus protested weakly. No, you just spread rumors about my mental state, convinced people I was becoming forgetful and unsafe, and planned to have me warehoused like an old piece of furniture you didn't want anymore. Tatum was reading through the deed again, her face getting redder by the minute. You can't give away property worth nearly $500,000 to some cleaning lady. This is insane. Rosa isn't some cleaning lady, I said coldly. She's a registered nurse who's been kinder to me in 2 years than my own family has been in the last 5. She's worked 3 jobs to support her children, sent them money every month, and still found time to treat me like a human being instead of a burden. This is ridiculous, Tatum snapped, her mask finally slipping completely. We'll contest this. We'll have you declared mentally incompetent. No judge will believe a sane person would give away their entire inheritance to a stranger. I smiled. Go ahead and try. Harold insisted on complete medical and psychological evaluations before filing the papers. I have documentation from 3 different doctors stating that I'm of completely sound mind. Good luck explaining to a judge why you think a woman competent. Enough to live alone, drive, play tennis twice a week, and manage her own finances is somehow too incompetent to decide who gets her own property. Marcus was holding his head in his hands. Mom, please, we can work this out. Maybe Rosa would be willing to sell the house back. Why would she do that? So you can put me in Sunset Manor and keep the money? I don't think so. Then where are you going to live? Tatum demanded. Rosa has offered me the master suite. She wants to take care of me herself, here in the home I love. Imagine that. Someone actually wants to take care of me instead of getting rid of me. The defeat in their faces was almost satisfying. Almost. Mostly, it just made me sad for what we could have been if they'd chosen love over greed. You've destroyed everything, Tatum whispered. No, I said firmly. You destroyed everything when you decided I was more valuable dead than alive. You just didn't expect me to fight back. After Marcus and Tatum left, Tatum still clutching her useless folder of papers, Marcus looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes, I sat in my living room and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. The silence. wasn't the lonely kind I'd grown accustomed to. It was the satisfied quiet that comes after a job well done, after standing up for yourself when everyone expects you to lie down and take whatever they dish out. Rosa arrived that afternoon for what would be her first day as the homeowner rather than the help. She found me in the garden, tending to the roses Paul had planted for our 20th anniversary. "Mrs. Janine," she said softly, "Marcus and Tatum were here earlier. The neighbors saw them leaving, and they looked very upset." I looked up from the roses, noting how Rosa's voice carried a new confidence. Owning property had already changed her posture, the way she held her head. "They found out about the house." "How did they take it?" I laughed, surprising myself with how genuinely amused I felt. "About as well as you'd expect. Tatum threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent, and Marcus looked like he might cry." Rosa was quiet for a moment, deadheading some spent blooms with practiced efficiency. "Do you think they'll really try to fight it?" "They might try, but they won't succeed. Harold made sure of that." I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands. "Besides, what are they going to tell a judge? That I'm too mentally unstable to make my own decisions about my property, but perfectly stable enough to live alone without any supervision? Still, they must be very angry. I'm sure they are. But Rosa, anger is about all they have left now. They gambled that I'd be easy to manipulate, and they lost. Over the next few days, I learned just how thoroughly they'd lost. Marcus called several times, alternately trying to guilt me and threaten me. Tatum sent text messages that grew increasingly desperate as reality set in. They'd been counting on the money from my house to fund their lifestyle. A lifestyle that, I was beginning to realize, they couldn't actually afford on their own. But the most satisfying part was watching Rosa transform from a woman who apologized for taking up space to someone who owned her place in the world. When her children's visas were approved 2 months later, I was there to welcome them to their new home. Maria was 18, tall and serious like her mother, with dreams of medical school. Carlos was 16, quiet but brilliant with computers, already talking about studying engineering. And little Anna was 12 going on 30, with Rosa's kind eyes and a smile that could light up a room. "Lola Janine," Anna said, using the Filipino term for grandmother that Rosa had taught her. "Mama says you gave us this house. Is that really true?" I was sitting in what had become my favorite spot, the breakfast nook overlooking the garden, having coffee with Rosa while the children explored their new home. "It's true, sweetheart. But why? We're not even your real family." I looked at this child who'd been brave enough to let her mother go to another country, strong enough to help raise her younger siblings, smart enough to keep up her grades despite missing her mama every day for 3 years. Then I looked at Rosa, who was pursuing her nursing certification again now that she didn't need to work 3 jobs, and at Maria and Carlos, who were already enrolled in the local high school and talking about their futures with the confidence of kids who knew they were supported. "Anna," I said gently, "family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who treats you with kindness, who makes room for you in their heart. By that definition, you're more my real family than some people who share my DNA." The child seemed to consider this seriously. "Then can I call you Lola for real?" I would be honored. 6 months later, I was sitting in that same breakfast nook when I saw Marcus drive slowly past the house. He'd done this several times since Rosa and the children moved in, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. The house was alive. Again. Children's laughter echoing from the backyard, Rosa's voice calling them in for dinner, the warm glow of lights in windows that had been dark for too long. I felt a moment of sadness for what could have been, but it passed quickly. Marcus had made his choice, and so had I. Rosa found me there as the sun was setting, bringing me a cup of the jasmine tea she'd introduced me to. "The children want to cook dinner for you tonight," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Carlos found a recipe for your favorite pot roast online, and Anna insists she can make better biscuits than the ones from the bakery. They don't need to do that. They want to. They love you, Mrs. Janine. We all do. I sipped my tea, watching Maria help her younger siblings in the kitchen through the connecting doorway. Carlos was reading instructions from his phone while Anna stood on a step stool, flour dusting her apron as she worked on those biscuits. The scene was so wonderfully, chaotically domestic that it made my heart full. "Rosa," I said quietly, "do you ever regret it? Leaving the Philippines, working so hard, sacrificing so much?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I used to wonder, especially on the hardest days. But looking at my children now, seeing them with opportunities I could never have given them there, knowing they're safe and loved and building good lives." She smiled. "No, I don't regret it. Some sacrifices are worth making." I understood exactly what she meant. That night, as we sat around the dinner table, all of us together like a real family, I looked around at the faces illuminated by candlelight and felt completely content. Anna's biscuits were indeed better than the bakery's. Carlos had somehow managed to make pot roast that tasted exactly like the one Paul used to love. Maria was telling us about her acceptance to the local community college's pre-med program. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Not the cold calculation of worth and burden, not the resentment and manipulation I'd endured for years. This was warmth and laughter, and people who were genuinely happy to be in each other's company. Later, as Rosa helped me up to my room, not because I needed help, but because it had become our evening ritual, a few minutes to talk about the day, she paused at the top of the stairs. "Mrs. Janine, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I've been saving money from the rental income, and I want to set up a college fund for you." I stared at her. "A college fund for me? You always talk about wanting to learn photography properly, maybe take some art classes. You should do that, while you can still enjoy it." At 68 years old, with a family that finally valued me for who I was rather than what I could give them, I was being offered the chance to learn new things, explore interests I'd put aside for decades of taking care of everyone else. I started crying then, but they were good tears. Tears of gratitude and joy, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you made the right choice, even when it was the hardest choice. "Thank you," I whispered. And Rosa understood I wasn't just thanking her for the college fund suggestion. As I settled into bed that night, I could hear the comfortable sounds of my chosen family below, dishes being washed, children getting ready for school the next day, Rosa humming as she prepared for her nursing shift. Marcus and Tatum had tried to write me out of my own story, but instead, they'd given me the push I needed to write a better ending. One where I wasn't just surviving, but truly living. One where I was surrounded by people who saw me as a blessing rather than a burden. Sometimes the family you choose really is better than the family you're born with. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.